Well, hello! Just giving you the creepy face. It's been a while since I've been on here, and unfortunately, my computer blew up a couple of days ago, and so we're doing it in the new studio that wasn't quite ready yet. Doesn't have the right computer. Doesn't have sound dialed in quite right yet. But we got to make do, and I didn't want to put the schedule off because I'm traveling, and I want to get these live streams in and have some fun. So today I'm talking about why you don't need an aquarium filter. And what you do need, really. So it's a little bit of a trick question, but everyone on the planet, except for like 5 people, would say you have to have a filter on your aquarium, and most people do. They have multiple. They have, a canister, a hang-on back, a sponge filter. Can I get one more? Can I get a little bit more? And they think it's helping. Now, I'm not going to say it's hurting. In extreme cases, it actually can hurt you, but let's, kind of unpack what is actually going on. So when you buy a filter, you're getting something that moves water. You're getting something that in theory grows bacteria. Might have some chemical filtration going on in there too, and mechanical filtration. So the biggest beef I have is the chemical filtration. Now, in an unestablished aquarium, can be very beneficial. So maybe you've got some activated carbon, and in a filter that's got like a cartridge system, it's got maybe half an ounce, maybe an ounce of carbon, and carbon will absorb kind of lots of different organics and that kind of stuff. So it might absorb ammonia, which would be kind of useful, right? If you had a brand new aquarium, absorbing that ammonia might save some fish, but it also might delay your cycle. It also would eat plant fertilizer, and it would take out tannins out of the water. That's a good thing, right? But plant fertilizer, not so much. So we've got that chemical filtration going on there, and then you've got the mechanical part, which would be that fine floss. Now, if we've got a lot of debris in the water, and as long as we can get that to the intake of that, it'll get sucked in and it'll get caught there. Maybe that's a useful thing. I think of that as like a garbage can. It's nice to have a garbage can in your house. You can kind of put stuff in there, and then when it's convenient, you take it out to the curb, right? Kind of same thing. We can go and clean that filter whenever we need to, and hopefully we do it before it gets stinky and it's overflowing and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of useful. And then we've got the flow that comes from the aquarium or from the filter, and that in a hang-on back and in a canister is kind of meant to do like a back to front motion. So if this is the back of the aquarium and we're pushing all the way to the front, so the water comes out, pushes up, and tries to sweep it back into the intake. Now, that's good and bad. If you're just running a stock filter, it's going to suck up a ton of gunk, right? So we're really going to fill up that garbage can, and we're going to sell a lot of trash bags, right? Because you're going to have to change that filter all the time, and that's like buying trash bags. So it's kind of like they were able to sell you like a really small trash can, and let's say a bag that's this big is 10 cents, and a bag that's this big is also 10 cents. And so they're kind of pulling the wool over your eyes a little bit there. But so if we know that like all those things are going on, and then so if we're taking the bag out all the time, we're not really growing bacteria. We will grow bacteria on, let's say, the sides of the filter, like where the pad's not, all that slime that you feel in there, that's your beneficial bacteria, right? And so you feel around there going, yeah, there's some, but what we're not thinking about, especially if we're a new hobbyist or I've never thought about it, is the fact that everything's kind of slimy in an aquarium, right? So that piece of wood you touched and it slipped out of your hand, that was bacteria that did that. The castle, the fake plant, the live plant, the rocks, the glass sides that we scrape down, so that's one of the reasons why we might not want to scrape down all the sides of our aquariums, is there's bacteria on all the walls, right? And if we get in there and we scrape all the algae and bacteria off, and we do all 4 walls, we might lose quite a bit. So if we know that bacteria is everywhere, it makes having a bacteria in the filter maybe not as important. Now, there are extreme cases. So if you were running, let's say, my 800-gallon aquarium, which you may have seen out in the studio there, if it had no substrate at all, like it was just bare bottom and just had the 4 sides and the top and bottom and no decor in it, there wouldn't be very much space at all for bacteria to grow, right? Like we can imagine an empty box, right? doesn't have a whole lot of surface area. Whereas if we have a cardboard box and we fill it full of stuff, everything that's in there has a surface, and so the surface area goes up by a lot. That's the premise behind a filter, is to add surface area, add flow, those types of things. So we can do that with a filter if we put in a ton of biomedia. Maybe we're using rings, maybe we're using sponge, maybe we're using fine filter pads. Even over time, like carbon, at first we absorb ammonia and we absorb organics and that type of stuff. But long term, if you leave it in there, even bacteria will colonize on that. It'll colonize on literally anything. When you think about it, in your home, you can grow bacteria almost anywhere, right? So same thing goes on in your aquarium. It grows almost anywhere. So I don't think you necessarily need a filter. In a perfect world, if you've got all this bacteria in your aquarium and we don't have, let's say, toxins in our water like ammonia, maybe paint fumes, maybe perfume, maybe lotion, things like that. If that's not in there, maybe we don't need the chemical part of it, right? And if we don't necessarily need the biological, the bacteria part of it, what do we need? We actually need water flow. That's the important thing that a filter fixes for most hobbyists that they don't realize, is that you put a filter on, you're going to get a flow pattern. Even if you have a 75-gallon tank, right, and you put a filter on 1/2, you're at least getting the water to circulate there. And then as fish swim back and forth, they're going to change the current pattern. And so you'll get some mixing going this way as well. So almost any source of water movement will improve your filtration. The big goal is to not get stratifying layers. Now that's big fancy talk for, we don't want to get the water down low to stay down low. And we don't want the water up top to stay up top. So let's say you've got an aquarium heater in there, and right around the heater it's really warm, right? And if you've got like the Fluval heater, it might be flashing low flow. It might be really hot right around it, but on the other side of your tank, it's 2 or 3 degrees cooler because there's nothing moving the water around. Well, something like a canister filter would help that. Imagine if you had the intake right next to the heater, it would pull in warm water, and then if we had the output on the other side, it would expel that warm water. And so you'd get this current kind of doing like a triangle motion in your aquarium to move that water around. So that's one thing that we can kind of wrap our heads around. You know, if you've ever had a sink and let's say you're doing the dishes, you turn the water on really hot, even though your hands are under the water, you can feel the hot water coming in right there. You move them off to the sides, much cooler, right? Kind of the same thing. So think about that. And then if we think, instead of thinking about the heat, let's think about the ammonia. If the ammonia travels the same way, which it does, it's going to be, you know, in our best interest to move that ammonia around and spread it around so that we can use all the bacteria we have on the glass, on the gravel, on the wood, on wherever we've got it. So the hang-on back or the canister or whatever filter you're running, it's really that flow we need, and that can be accomplished in so many ways. We could use a power head, we could use kind of a wave maker, we could use a bunch of air stones, right, or a big long bubble wall. If you get a bunch of air, like let's say you get a curtain along the back of air just going up, all that bubbles rising up are going to cause a current to go, and you're going to get the whole tank rolling this way. So think about your flow pattern in your aquarium. Now, why I made this video is there's so many people that start with, I have this size tank and I have this size filter, so I'm good, right? And the answer could be yes, could be no, but you know, if you buy a filter made for a 55-gallon aquarium, there's 55s that are only 3 feet long. There's 55s that are 4 feet long. There's even a set, like it's like a 60-gallon that's 5 feet long. And so if you have it on one end, every foot you're adding onto it, your circulation's getting worse and worse and worse, right? Kind of the same thing when it comes to stocking levels. The more fish you have, the more surface area you might need. So I maintain that for your average like hobbyist aquarium that has, let's say, maybe you've got a plant or two in there, you've got some logs, you've got gravel, maybe you've got like a diver going on, and a moderate stock load where it's not just insane, there's enough bacteria in your aquarium by itself to sustain that. You just got to move all the water around. Now, if you have, let's say, a really big pair of cichlids that are spawning in there in that same size aquarium, and they're digging up all the gravel and piling it up and moving it around, you may not, just because you might have to put in more food, but also the cichlids may be disturbing the bacteria on the gravel. If they were to pile it up in a big pile on one corner, which they tend to do, maybe after the first 2 or 3 inches, all the bacteria that was alive is now dead because it's not getting enough circulation. Again, back to that water circulation thing, right? We can get the same thing going on if we put in big pieces of wood or big rocks. If we don't get the right flow, you can imagine if my head is the hang-on back filter and the water's coming out and it needs to sweep back to me, if we put a big old rock right in front and we send that water across the top, it tumbles off the front and hits that rock, there's going to be a big dead spot right behind it, right? So you really got to look at the way the water moves around your aquarium. Maybe you've got big fish that are moving a ton of water for you. And in extreme situations, filtration is very needed and very beneficial. But a lot of people will give benefits to a filter that might not need to be there. They might think like, well, my hang-on back brings oxygen in the water. It's like, well, technically that answer is true, but it's not nearly as much as like an air stone would do, or a power head that's sucking in air and pushing out the air and the water at the same time. That would do a much better job. So I guess what I'm trying to get across is there's a different tool for every little job, and one size doesn't fit all.